Good morning, Bardstown and Nelson County. You hit the right button over here so you can see us on BRTV. Jim Brooks here with Bradford and Brooks and my co-host, Margie Bradford. We'll be with you till the top of the hour today. And we're continuing our series of programs. Well, actually, I guess last week was our first one.
Yep.
Or no, actually 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Our series of interviews with the candidates for for constitutional state offices, and these are the guys who do those head of those agencies in Frankfort. And last couple of weeks, we did have candidates for Court of Appeals.
Yes, we did. The nonpartisan race that's
Right.
on the ticket.
Right. So now we're down to this week. We're joined in the studio by Robert Conway, a candidate for. What's the correct title, Robert?
Commissioner of Agriculture.
Commissioner of Agriculture.
Yes.
Good morning, Robert.
Good morning.
Well, thanks for coming today. And, sometimes I think we forget in Nelson County that Nelson County, despite all the industry that's here and business, that we still have a significant amount of agriculture that goes on here in Nelson County.
Yes, you really do. I mean, there is quite a bit, and all you have to do is drive up and down the Bluegrass Parkway, and you can see it from the road. I mean, it's still very prevalent, and I would say it's probably a major part of the economic progress of Nelson County.
I understand you are a working farmer.
I am. I'm literally an eighth generation Kentucky farmer. My youngest son out of 4 sons, surprised me when he came to me and said, Dad, he wanted to farm. And while there was a elated part of me that was excited that we were able to keep the tradition in the family, the other part of me feared for him because it's very difficult now to make it on the farm. So he is literally a 9th generation farmer, and literally there is no more than that in Kentucky. My great-grandfather, many times removed, came to Kentucky with Daniel Boone in 1775, and we have 2 farms. One's been in the family since 1780, and the other's been in the family since 1870. And, that's not just my history. That's everybody else's. That's Kentucky history, and I think that's important.
All right. As a candidate for Commissioner of Agriculture, how and I think a lot of people may not even think a lot about how big agriculture is, what that means to Kentucky overall.
Well,
as far as the economic picture,
it's Kentucky was at one time predominantly a rural state, and majority of the income was derived off the farm. That is not quite the case, but still, just a little bit shy of 50% of the income in Kentucky is going to be derived from a farm based. That's the reason why right now we're in probably some of the most critical times. I don't want to just go around and moan doom and gloom, but right now it's very difficult to make it on a farm. We need to be very concerned. I'm 63 years old. The average age of a farmer in the state of Kentucky is close to 60. We're not getting younger. We as a society are aging. And it comes back to some of the things that I'm literally running on with regards to the platform that I personally am running on. You're correct in the sense that the economics of agriculture are very important and still very important in the state of Kentucky.
We don't. Those of us who live in the city, we may not often think about farms other than what time of the week the farmers markets take place. But even those across Kentucky have become significant in every community that has them, as a wonderful source of fresh fruit, produce, like from farm to table, basically.
Well, I think it even exceeds that. I think people need to be concerned because your family farms, and I consider myself a small family farm. Both our farms are right at or less than 100 acres. Mm-hmm. Your family farms establish a lot of the parameters for agriculture in the state. You have your large corporate farms, and I'm in no way against corporate farms, but you need to understand small family farms help establish the pricing structure within the state, what's something worth? Because, right now, some of the issues that I'm concerned about is like in 2001, it cost $200 to plant an acre of corn.
Mm-hmm.
This year it costs $700, and the price of corn is less now than it was then. So
Wow.
how, anywhere actually, if you travel the state, anywhere literally now past west of Elizabethtown, you can't hardly tell the difference between Kentucky and Iowa, other than the landscape. We still have some hills here. Corn and soybeans have taken over as a predominant crop in western Kentucky with the advent of the abolition of the tobacco program. Mm-hmm. So when you start looking at that, how can you make it? Well, unless you're raising 250 bushels of corn per acre, you're going to be hard-pressed to make it. So the economics of farming right now are very difficult. Your small family farms help establish that. And, one of the things I think people need to look at is we probably need to diversify and don't put all our eggs in one basket.
Well, I know having, my aunts and uncles who were farmers and back through the years, and I know how important that tobacco crop was to so many of my kinfolk, that they have a good tobacco crop that year, and now that revenue stream for most Kentucky farmers is gone.
Well, and we have not replaced that either. Mm-hmm. Let's be honest about it. That occurred in 2004, and I could sit here, and I have chosen in my campaign not to be political, more or less deal with the issues. To be very honest about it, since 2004, we've had nothing to replace tobacco. There's nothing in any of our lives that bought the amount of Christmas presents or educated the children who allowed them to better themselves than what their parents. I myself, my dad grew up on a small tobacco farm, very poor, and the day after he graduated high school, he joined the Navy. Well, he went out and he got a career, he learned a career, came back, married his sweetheart. Well, most of us as parents always want our kids to do better than we did. And, tobacco, we all kind of saw it coming for years, but still we really weren't ready for it when it disappeared. There's a lot of interest right now in hemp as a potential replacement crop. And I support that wholeheartedly. My concern is, and you were talking about how, tobacco really had a broad stroke in Kentucky, from eastern Kentucky to the small family plots in eastern Kentucky all the way to the large farms in western Kentucky. There was nothing ever before or since that affected everybody. Mm-hmm. Hemp is one of those things that could. My concern is that right now, this year, they've allowed a lot of people to get into it. They've allowed a lot of acres to be grown. And it's kind of the Wild West because it's kind of like finding its own level. Mm-hmm. The problem with that is, I'm afraid next year, after a political year, a lot of things are done for political reasons, but after a political year, next year, the discussions can be, well, we really haven't got the developing markets established yet. We've got too much of it out there, so we're going to cut. So what I am proposing is that I think that for hemp, Kentucky farms and farm families should have, any farm that has a FSA number should be granted a base, just like tobacco. Mm-hmm. Everyone should be able to benefit from the program. Because look at eastern Kentucky alone. They're struggling. They've lost coal. They've lost tobacco. People are moving out of the region left and right. So if, and we know they know how to raise marijuana up there. We've known that for years, So literally, a small farm could have a base, a hemp base, and would be able to survive. But we also have to develop those markets. But there's a lot to it right now, and I wish they would remove the politics. Unfortunately, right now there is a lot of political consideration. And one of the things that I'm pushing, you didn't ask me, but I'm literally running on four things. First is to save the family farms. The values earned and the lessons learned on a farm are second to none. I think farms in Kentucky have somehow touched us all, whether we grew up on it, whether our grandparents had it, or family, friends, whoever. Somehow we've had experiences on the farm, and I myself have. Our farms go back to the founding of Kentucky. I know what it was like to grow up. My kids all grew up on a farm. So we have to say the family farm. And actually, I think with the things that have occurred this year with regards to what's happening to the prices of corn and soybeans due to things outside farmers' control,
Right.
I think we need to be concerned about all farms because I think they're all in jeopardy. The second thing is we have to get young people involved in agriculture, period. We have to get a new generation, and so in order to do that, we have to make the economics of farming where someone wants to do it because they can earn a living. Right now, a pound of milk is selling for $1.29 you're getting as a farmer, and you're losing money because it's selling for $1.99 and you can't make it. So I read something, somehow Farm Aid has adopted me. They found out about my candidacy, and just in the last week they started force-feeding me all this information on the internet. But one of the things that caught my eye yesterday I looked at is the state of Wisconsin right now is losing 2 dairy farms a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so farms are in serious trouble. So we have to get young people. We have to make it worth it that they can make a living out of it. The third thing I'm pushing for is, with the hemp program, is that we have a base type program for the hemp industry. I think that is more than fair, and it's doable in Kentucky. The fourth thing, which is to me a moral situation, this is not political, should not be political, is I want the legalization of medical marijuana. Mm-hmm. It would benefit Kentucky farms and farm families to grow it. It would benefit Kentucky's citizens to be able to use it. And to me, that is a moral issue. That is not a political issue. I've had so many people come up to me since I started saying that this is what I want for the people of Kentucky. I have not had one person, not one, and I probably have had thousands come up to me, tell me the stories of how it's benefited either them or their loved one. I've not had one person come up and say, we don't want this. Now, the other side of this is some people say, well, if we're going to have medical, why don't we just go ahead and legalize it all? Well, I understand that application, what I explained to them, and they understand it, is I think we need to crawl before we walk.
Right.
And I think with the government that we have in Frankfurt right now, you know, they voted 19-1 to take it out of committee, or 17-1 to take it out of committee. But the unfortunate aspect of it is the Republican-controlled Senate would not bring it to a vote. And I think that the groundswell that I'm seeing out there is that people want this and they want it now. They don't want it tomorrow, because anything that can make somebody's life a little more tolerable, less painful, live longer, or make the sun a little bit brighter, why would you not want to do it for one of your fellow man?
Robert, what would you say the difference is between you and your opponent in policies?
Well, a couple things is, the current Commissioner of Agriculture has never farmed a day in his life. That's a misnomer for people to think about it. Unfortunately, he's premature gray. He's 34 years old, and he's a nice young man. I've known him. He graduated high school with one of my sons. His father and I on the Scott County Soil and Water Conservation Board. But I know for a fact he is not a farmer. He has not farmed. He likes politics. He is a political up-and-comer, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's got a law degree, never practiced law. He did all that to help buffer his political career, and that's fine. But I think farmers in Kentucky need someone who farms, who understands what it's like. What I did this morning, I got a 4 o'clock, went out, and we've got some baby calves that were rejected, got a set of twins. So at 4:30 this morning, I was bottle feeding. And then I got up and got dressed, and I went to work, and my office is on the south end of Lexington. And tonight, when I get home, I will farm again, because I, like a lot of people, have had to go back to work so I can farm. Now, I want you to think about that. I have to work so I can farm. But here's the thing. Most people in Kentucky are in that boat. When I was chairman of the Scott County Board of Education, one of the things that I was damn determined to do for people was to provide the best benefits we could have at Scott County schools. Knowing that those bus drivers who got up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go pick your kids up, that would start the buses and warm them up so your kids wouldn't suffer, that they farmed. And they didn't have the benefits. They didn't have the insurance and the other things. So those lunchroom cafeteria workers, the food service people, the wives of the farmers, or the farmers, we did everything we could to help them. And so in our school district, we have really good benefits for our employees because we understand that they need them. And it would be kind of a eye-opening situation on occasion when somebody that was a good friend of yours would come up and open their check and show me their check, and I was chairman of the Board of Education. where it would not have zeros on it, where they got not paid a penny for 2 weeks' worth of work. But the flip side was they were more than appreciative that they had the benefits.
Right.
So that is the main thing is, he's not a farmer, I am. The second thing is, comes back to the hemp and marijuana. He has been going around the state with Senator McConnell talking about the benefits of how the hemp has exploded in Kentucky, but still the sad part about it is we still don't have a concrete program, and while we were on the forefront of this at the beginning, many states have now surpassed us on what they have done. But the main thing I would go is that he has on record as saying that he does not support the legalization of medical marijuana, and I do, point blank. I've already had this conversation with Mr. Bashir, and we will follow up probably even tomorrow night because he and I together will be in Simpson County at a dinner, and I think it is something that we need, it's the right thing to do for people, period.
Robert, what would back to the raising of hemp and the establishment of a base for different farmers? How would that work? I mean, would you get a base based on the amount of acreage you had?
Well,
or
the gentleman
like
that
a lottery,
I
or?
beat in the primary, and I don't like the word beat, the one that I had more votes than him, a gentleman by the name of Joe Trigg, who's out of Glasgow.
Yes.
Joe Trigg is one of the finest people
Yeah.
I've met, and I know, and he is on the forefront of this. And basically what I've told Joe is, and we've talked about it, I've been down to see him a couple times at his place in Glasgow, is that I would have him have major input, if not run the hemp program for the state of Kentucky.
Yeah.
He has got this all laid out, and we've talked about it in depth. But each farm would be entitled to it, and then it gets back to what type of medical marijuana are you talking about. Medical marijuana, I think, would be like 1 acre per farm. Each person has the ability, but then the hemp would be separate from that. So there's things that for me to sit here and say, one of the things that I have been complimented on is I don't go around telling people what I'm going to do and not have the power to do it, but I tell people what I think we can do. And I think at that point in stage that this is very important to this state, and I think why not take advantage of it?
Right.
All right, well, Robert, we need to take a commercial break. And for our listeners, we will be back in just a few moments after these commercial messages. You're listening to Bradford and Brooks and our interview with Robert Conway, who's the candidate for Ag Commissioner. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, you're back with Bradford and Brooks. Jim Brooks and Margie Bradford will be here with you till the top of the hour. And we're continuing our series of interviews with candidates for state office. And today we're joined by Robert Conway, who is the Democratic nominee for Ag Commissioner. And we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today, Robert, to talk about agriculture and the position of Ag Commissioner. And agriculture is big business in Kentucky, make no mistake about it. Sometimes we don't, it's not always on our mind, but you don't have to drive very far outside Bardstown to see farms in action, whether they're raising whether it's beef cattle or raising soybeans or corn or what have you for feed or et cetera. But there's a lot of farm activity here in Nelson County, and well, once you get outside the main population centers, you don't have to go very far at all to run into active farms. And Robert, you've been talking about this small farm and how difficult it is. What are the biggest threats to the small family farm in your mind? The top, say, 2 or 3 things that are the biggest threat.
Well, let me just read something that we were typing up. We're coming up with an agricultural agenda that I have got a group of farmers that are supporting me. And I've actually got people that are large grain farmers, and I've got small family farms. We all have a vested interest because farms are who we are. And let's be honest about it, they are definitely at risk. And I'll just read this real quick because I was looking. It says U.S. News gives Kentucky a ranking number 45 in overall economy. Where does agriculture fit in? Despite the $36 million annual appropriation for the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, the number of small farms is on the decline, and family farms are forced out almost every day. Urban sprawl continues, but urban farms are not sufficiently designed into our growing cities. Rural farms that want to grow face crushing debt and nearly have to sign their souls over in loans and contracts. Meanwhile, overproduction of annual commodities, corn, soybeans, and wheat continues to expand despite low profitability and insecure export markets. We now grow between 1.4 and 1.9 million acres of corn and soybean in Kentucky alone, and that's annually. We can plant more of these to get out of this problem, and we are losing precious grassland ecosystems in the process. You know, Kentucky is one of the largest beef cattle states in the country. We have over 1 million head in the state. And we rely on the grass ecosystem because that's basically what we do. We raise them, then we send them off to other states to finish them.
Right.
One of the things that my group is looking at is to pull those cattle back into Kentucky and finish them off here. Have the feedlots here. You know, we've got corn, an unbelievable amount of corn. You know, I was reading something yesterday that the tariff war is not only affecting farms and farm families, it's affecting the bourbon industry as well. There was a major article yesterday on Yahoo News about how, like, I don't remember the exact number, like sales are off like 25% just within the past year, and that all affects all of us. That affects the people in Nelson County that works at the distilleries. It affects the people in Nelson County that are raising the corn, because less sales means less production means less hours of work means less corn is going to be purchased. So, you know, there's the domino effect. But nobody's talking about those issues. One of the things that right now seems to just be destroying the farms is farmers are losing faith right now in our government over the tariff situation because, you know, we've lost major markets in China, and all of a sudden now we got stuff. You know, I was in Western Kentucky for 3 days during Fancy Farm, and I not only did the political stuff, I did the personal stuff. I went in and just stopped. I stopped at people's houses, and they were shocked. I'd tell them who I was. I said, well, I'm running for Commissioner of Agriculture. Oh, really? And I said, yeah, and I just was stopping in and talk. Well, you know, I love going to the bounce chairs in the backyard. Okay, under the tree. That's how I grew up with my grandparents. We always went on Sunday afternoons, had the bounce chairs in the backyard under the tree. We spent all day out there talking as a family. I enjoyed every bit of that, but those people would open up and tell you the problems. And they're scared because the bins are full. This year in Kentucky, most of the crops are bumper crops. You know, there's situations in Western Kentucky where there was so much rain early in the planting season that some people, especially tobacco, they planted once, twice, sometimes 3 times. So, you know, they're not going to make any money. You know, their costs are eating them up. So, you know, you were asking 3 or 4 things. One of it is the cost of land in Kentucky. Even though we think things are high, people move in here and it's cheap to them. But for a young person to buy a farm now, it's virtually impossible to pay it off, let alone try to raise a family on it. So you got that issue. The other issue is the commodity prices. You know, corporate America is kind of forcing farms to either get big or get out. You know, farm size actually is growing. You know, one thing that I tell people is in 2007, we had 86,500 farms in Kentucky. As of December last year, we have 75,000. We've lost 11,000 farms in this state. In a little over 10 years.
Wow.
And they're leaving here. And it's not just because of urban sprawl, like I live in Scott County. Well, obviously the number one crop in Scott County is a 3-bedroom ranch. It's the number one growing community in the state because of Toyota.
Sure.
But then you got Fayette County, you got Northern Kentucky, you got Jefferson, and Jefferson is bleeding over into Nelson and Bullitt and, you know, and those other counties on the periphery. So basically, that is an issue. But the main thing is it's just very, very hard to make it on the farm due to the economics. You know, when you go to Kroger and you buy a gallon of milk for $1.99, and that's what it costs a farmer to produce is $1.99, but they're getting paid $1.29. Well, they're losing 70 cents on every gallon. They can't compete to the corporate farms that are up in northern Indiana. They got 10,000 head of cattle. But I'm going to tell you, there's a day of reckoning. There's a day coming where we're going to regret not having those dairy farms, those family dairy farms. and it'll be sooner than later.
Talking about tariffs, had some discussions with various people around the community, and I've had it said to me, well, the tariffs, I was talking about the concern of effect of tariffs on the farmers, and this person said to me that, well, that the stock market remains high, and so no, he doesn't believe it's had an effect on farmers. So, that's a different take there, and but that's not addressing what it's doing to the individual farmer.
I think farmers right now are sitting on pins and needles. I think they're scared to death. There was a $27 billion bailout by the administration, but most of that money went to the large farms, not to the small farms. That's playing politics. And, to me, I may belong to a respective political party, but I'm about the person and not the party. I'm for everybody. I am what I am because I've been that my whole life, and I've chose to stay where it is that I am. But at the end of the day, this should be about people, and it shouldn't be about parties, and it shouldn't be about politics. People are suffering. I can tell you right now, my son went over to the FSA office the other day and talked to he's got a program where we're making some improvements on the farm. And it's a matching grant kind of thing. The government, if you fit the parameters, and we're talking about less than $5,000, so we're not talking a major program here, but he's getting a 50% match. He has to pay for the half of it. And I think it maybe has to do with the waterways on the farm. Mm-hmm. To run water back, because there's no money anymore to build ponds. They don't do that, but they'll run the water lines back so you can have waters to your cattle and whatever. So he's doing that, and he went over to the office yesterday, and the guy point blank told him, and this should raise signals to everybody that's listening to me today, said that they were at least 3 weeks out before they could talk to him because they had issues with basically bad loans. Ooh. That means what you and I think it means. It means people are now struggling, that they're now starting to lose their farms, or they're trying to help them at the last second. Right. And I personally think that if something doesn't change with the tariffs, I think by the end of this year we could be looking at record amount of bankruptcies and stuff on farms. And, how terrible is it to have a place that's been passed down from generation to generation that you don't even owe money on, but you can't afford to keep it, let alone to buy a piece of land and try to make a living out of it. Because, farming is something that is something that you have a passion for. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's something you really want to do, but once you do it, you understand. When you're on that tractor and you're out there mowing in the afternoon and you're watching the sunset, I can't tell you the feeling that you have in your heart. Nobody else wants to do that. You do, and it is worth every penny, every minute that you can do it.
Do you... There have been some discussions, actually in fiscal court. A gentleman who's involved with CBD oil addressed the court. They're looking for people interested in growing a high-quality hemp in order to get. The explanation was that growing hemp for CBD oil, it's a little trickier process to get that quality. And of course, I don't know the ins and outs of that, but it's not as simple as just. It's not. It's not as simple as just letting it grow.
It almost take a chemist to, they come out and they test your plants, and there's some plants that have higher THC, and there's all these acronyms for whatever, but no, that's the reason why I think. Less the discussion on recreational at this time, the medical marijuana, that would encompass a lot of those things, and I totally support that, because the other is, like, they can come in, if you don't meet the certain criteria, basically you just have to plow your crop under. Right now there's no insurance, so a lot of these people right now have jumped into the hemp industry. They're buying either the tunnels with the greenhouses to raise the plants, or they've gone out and bought the plants from somebody and they put them out, either not having a market, or they have assigned themselves to a someone that will, take that and
process it,
yeah, process it.
Yeah.
And, there's still horror stories out there where people sold it 3 years ago and still haven't been paid. So basically, when I say this, I mean this, the hemp industry right now in Kentucky is kind of like the Wild West.
Right.
It's finding its own level, but I think for political reasons this year, the current administration just let anybody, and everybody has, there's people last year had 3 acres, this year got 60. And so there's tremendous amount, and they're touting that, but I'm concerned about the aftermarket, the processors, and who's good and who's bad, who's quality, who's not. That is something we're going to have to decide, and it's something that needs to be decided quick, because otherwise people are going to be taken advantage of.
Right. Well, if you're growing hemp for fiber, I guess you could probably do 60 acres. But if you're growing it for the CBD oil, that's a different. It just requires a lot more care and the way it's been described to me.
Now, what is the difference between medical marijuana and the CBD oil? What is the difference?
It's got more of the good stuff in it. It's about the
THC.
layman's term that I can give you. It's just got more of the good stuff beyond a legal amount. And
Well, does it involve a different plant, or is it a plant that's modified, or how do you tell the difference?
it's kind of like the difference between flue-cured tobacco and burley tobacco.
Well, now you
It's
lost
all,
me.
it's
You lost
all,
me
it's
there.
all, it's kind of the same, but it's not. I know that sounds like political, but I don't. Listen, I'm learning this as I go too, because I'm not an aficionado on hemp, and I'm learning as I go. I know a heck of a lot more now than I did a month ago or a year ago, but there's more. And actually, one of the people I went and talked to was somebody that is one of the foremost people in the state. Was one of the first people that brought it in here. And I went to him. His office is only about a half mile from where mine is in Lexington. And I went to him, and he showed me his greenhouses, and he explained the plants. And he has all of that at one location. But he also is one of the few people in the state that he grows it, he processes it, then he has a retail store. So I've been to number 1. I've yet to go to number 2 and 3. I just have to have an afternoon that I'm not running from here to there. And I'm going to go.
But this is the CBD oil.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
But he has the other plants there too, in case he decides to go that route or it gets legalized.
Well, years and years ago, Kentucky was a major hemp producer.
It was
It's
raised
used
on
for-
our farm back in turn of the century through World War II,
Used for making ropes.
and it's a great commodity to make ropes.
sure.
That
There's
is
nothing better than a good hemp rope.
it's the best. There's just a lot of, unfortunately, I think we are where we are because of money. And I don't want to get political about it, but it has to do with money. And there's a reason why we haven't had it to now, because it has to do with money. But at the end of the day, for Kentucky farmers, I think there's nothing that we've got out there that can help. But I don't think it is a total replacement for tobacco. We're not ever going to have anything for tobacco in my lifetime. And I still am very bitter about that because of how that program, how that went down. The tobacco companies were being sued by individual states for all the cancer deaths and stuff, and the health care costs in those respective states. And at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is, they were looking at hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars worth of lawsuits. They went to Congress. They said, help us. Well, Congress bailed them out. But in the process, Congress gave them what they wanted, which was the abolition of the tobacco program. They no longer had to deal with small farms, small family farms. They got rid of the warehouses. I mean, trust me, they made their money back in record time. And what I tell people on the campaign trails, they need to be very concerned because big tobacco has purchased into the hemp industry just since January. And that should send signals of all kinds and not good flags to everybody. Because they would do the same thing to the hemp program they would do with the tobacco program. So that's why I'm running for commissioners, because I think somebody needs to stand up there and look out for the farms and farm families in Kentucky.
All right, we need to take another commercial break. You're listening to Bradford and Brooks, and we're going to pause now for some commercial messages. Stay tuned. Margie and I will be right back. All right, you're back with Bradford and Brooks here on WBRT. Bradford and Brooks is brought to you by Springview Hospital in Lebanon. And I'll take a moment to shout out to our Marion County and Lebanon listeners who are listening to us today on 94.9 FM. So we appreciate your all's listenership there in Marion and Lebanon, Marion County and Lebanon. All right, we're back with you're back with Jim Brooks and Margie Bradford. Will be here till the top of the hour with our very special studio guest, Mr. Robert Conway. Robert is the Democratic nominee for Ag Commissioner, and so we've been talking all things agriculture. And Robert, just quickly, I know we've got about 10 minutes left. You tell us a little about your qualifications. In addition to being a farmer, you've had some excellent experience as far as dealing with organizations as a former school board member too.
I retired as an executive for General Electric, GE Capital, the finance arm. I left them and actually with the vice president of GE started a brand new venture capitalist company. We did that for a number of years. And then I decided to retire. Dumbest thing I've ever done because I didn't realize I still had 3 kids in college and that was just not smart. So I had to go back to work, and then the economy in 2008 tanked and things changed for everybody. So I literally have had to go back to work to farm, and I'm being sincere about that because I need the benefits and stuff like everybody else. I had to go back and get insurance and stuff. I was the board member and chair of the Scott County Board of Education, retired a little over a year ago. I'm currently on the Scott County Soil and Water Conservation Board. My whole life, for 25 years, I coach youth sports in Scott County. I've been on every club and organization you can be on. Elder in the church, ordained minister. I don't talk about that often, and it starts going from there to there to there. And I've been actively involved. And I literally jumped into this because I felt like that we're missing the boat. Our farms and farm families in rural Kentucky and the landscape as we know it is in trouble, and I felt like that if we waited 4 years or 8 years, that might be too late. We need to address these issues now on what to do to get the farm economy healthy. Kentucky is still a predominantly rural county. Now, the numbers may say that Lexington, Louisville, and the other metropolitan areas are growing expeditiously, but the truth of the matter is, when you get in your car and you drive across this state, whether it's the hills in eastern Kentucky to Fulton County and western Kentucky, we are still a predominantly rural state. And every one of those little communities live and die with what happens on the farm. And right now they're struggling, and you can tell by driving through them.
Speaking of farm, I understand that you made quite a splash at Fancy Farm. Want to talk to us about that? I know that your speech there was quite widely lauded and has been replayed and posted on a number of websites. So can you tell us what's happened since then?
Well, I can tell you what precipitated that. It was a humbling experience. I've never run for statewide office.
Right.
I've never run for anything other than a nonpartisan community-based job that usually didn't pay anything. You got a lot of grief from the community. But at the end of the day, excuse me, somebody's calling me. Basically, what it amounted to is I didn't know what to expect, never been to Fancy Farm. And when I got up there, and I don't think I'm ashamed to tell anybody this, when I got up there, Andy Bashir came over to me and he said, Mr. Conway, I know you've never done anything like this, but let me explain to you how this will play out. He said, you see all those people on that side over there? And I said, yes, sir. He said, they're here because they like you and they're going to vote for you. And nothing you're going to do or say today is going to change your mind. And you need to play to that side. You see that other side over there? I said, yes, sir. He said, they don't like you. There's nothing you're going to say going to get them to vote for you. And they're going to try to throw you off, and you don't look over there and understand that their intent is to get you rattled. I said, yes, sir, I appreciate that. So, I didn't mind taking advice from somebody that's my junior. So when I got up there, literally, people couldn't hear this on TV, but I heard it because it was deafening. When it's directed to you, you can't think it was so loud. It doesn't look that way on TV, and when I jumped up there, and they introduced me, the young Republicans over here, and I'm not going to say anything ill about those fine folk, because I have a lot of my friends are Republican. They're yelling, who are you? Who are you? And it was like somebody opened the door up, because that's when I said, well, I'll tell you who I am, and then it just led from one thing to another. So it was a totally non-prepared speech. None of my speeches are. I can honestly sit here and tell you I've given, as of last night, I gave one yesterday in Shelby County, gave one last night in eastern Louisville with John Yarmouth. I have given 163 speeches since I started this on February 1st. I have been to 91 counties in Kentucky, and I have put 55,000 miles on my car, and I have worn the car out, seriously. This is a labor of love. I'm doing it because I love people, but the main thing is I care. And yes, to your point, what it has done is really jump-started my campaign, because I think people were kind of interested in what I had to say. But now, when I'm out, the phone calls and stuff that people are giving to me are extremely gracious. The compliments are extremely humbling. And I really am kind of a throwback to what people might have been years ago. I am truly trying to serve the people. There's no personal gain here. I see my son, what he has to deal with, and I mean, he's struggling. He's literally working 3 jobs. He's 27 years old. He played football at the University of Louisville. He was in the Sugar Bowl, but when Charlie Strong left and went to Texas, he transferred to UK, would not play football there, got a degree in ag, and he is the 9th generation. But if I don't do something to help him, here's a guy that doesn't even have to worry about paying the farm off, just trying to make it. Mm-hmm. And he's having to work 3 jobs to be able to farm. So I look at what he's trying to do. I want to help him. I want to help other people, and that's why I'm doing this.
All right.
I can't think of a better reason to run for ag commissioner.
Well, like I tell people, I'm the only one running that actually farms, and I don't say that to be mean, but that is the fact. I know what it was like this winter to freeze your bottom off, and it rained nonstop, and I've still got 3-foot deep ruts on the farm, that there's places literally on our farm I cannot drive yet because of the kind of winter we had.
Talking about the loss of farms, I know just right here in Nelson County, how many farms have been lost here. I remember how many, when we used to have so many dairy farms.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a major, I think now only one left?
I think so. When I was, when I had just graduated high school, a friend of mine was he was his brother-in-law was a milk truck route driver.
Right.
And he had a back injury, so my friend filled in for him, and I rode that route with him for about a week. And there were dairies all over Nelson County.
All over.
And I mean,
Yeah.
we had a full load we took down to Louisville, a full load of milk every day. And it was fascinating because you never think about how milk gets from a dairy to a processing plant. But then over the years, we're down to maybe one dairy,
Right.
Operating dairy in Nelson County.
Well,
that just floors me because I remember when
it was a hard life, but it was a good life. Mm-hmm. It was, I mean, you learn values on that farm you didn't learn anywhere else. The only thing that I will leave you with that was political, that I took offense at, and I don't blame him, but when the current commissioner stood up at Fancy Farm and talked about how things were really great on the farm, I just don't think they are. When you lose, we go from 86.5 to 75. When you lose, 11,500 farms in 12 years, folks, that's not good times on the farm. I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
It just isn't.
Well, I can't disagree with you there. But there's something magical, I think, about when you have your kids out, and when you can teach them, you can pull a carrot out of the dirt, shake the dirt off of it. Nothing tastes fresher than vegetables just right out of the garden.
You'd be amazed how many people don't have that experience and have never had the
Have never had
opportunity.
it.
And one of the things that I'm wanting to do is, one of the gentlemen, I know time's running short, is that one of the gentlemen that I was talking about, the young farmers, he is right now one of the foremost people in this country as far as urban farming. He is going into these urban areas, and he is setting up these gardens and stuff for people. We need that for a number of different reasons.
Well, back during the Depression, if it hadn't been for family farms, people wouldn't have starved. A lot of people would starve to death. And during the Second World War, they called them victory gardens.
Right.
And of course, when I grew up, my parents always had a garden. But those things like that are what keep us fed, keeps the nation fed. And they're not the more we lose, the worse off we're going to be, because not everybody can afford the grocery store prices.
Well, that's right. Well, Robert, we're just about down to the wire. thanks for
Well,
coming
thank
in
you so
today.
much for having me. I enjoyed it. Enjoyed the drive down. I'll enjoy the drive back, but I enjoyed talking to you all.
I enjoyed our conversation about the state of agriculture, and I guess we'll be watching the news and looking forward to November, and we'll see how things turn out.
Thank you, sir, very much.
All right, that'll do it for Bradford and Brooks, and Margie and I will be back next week with another show and another candidate. Stay tuned for the news at the top of the hour. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Wednesday. For another
WBRT
Bradford and Brooks.
Bardstown, 1320 AM, W246 AT Bardstown.